She was ready to build a family until she realized her husband had been slowly destroying her life from the very beginning. The man she loved poisoned her, manipulated her, and cut her off from the world. And now, just as she discovers she's pregnant, she learns the truth. He never loved her the way she believed. This isn't just heartbreak, it's a carefully designed betrayal she must survive.
My phone vibrated against my leg while I was having dinner with my husband. The message came from a number I did not recognize. It said to get up, walk out immediately, and not to say a word to him. I assumed it was sent by mistake until I looked up at my husband. He was smiling and pouring me more wine as he asked, "You know I would never do anything to hurt you, do you not?" In a few short minutes, a terrible secret would be revealed. Staying there a moment longer could have cost me everything. I am so glad you can join me for this story. Please leave a comment with your city or country so I can see how far these stories travel. Some details have been changed, but the lesson here could save a life, perhaps even your own. The wine was a Bordeaux from 2019, a personal favorite that Alexander had selected. My glass glowed like a small lantern in the gentle lighting of the Harvest restaurant. I have never been an overly sentimental person. Being married for 18 months did not seem like an occasion that called for a $100 bottle of wine. Alexander, however, insisted that we needed to celebrate. "We deserve this," he told me that morning, giving me a fast kiss before I left for my meeting. Just the two of us, no distractions. And so there we were, at a secluded table in one of Cambridge's finest restaurants on a crisp Friday evening. It was the type of place where renowned professors and wealthy investors dined at neighboring tables. At 32 years old, I often felt far beyond my age. I took over as chief executive officer of my parents' shipping company after they died in an automobile accident 2.5 years ago. The position had left me exhausted. Alexander, who was 41, possessed a charm that I always found captivating. He had touches of gray in his hair, an honest laugh, and he was an attentive listener. He was telling me about a shipping issue in Los Angeles, and I simply nodded. His voice, mixed with the wine, was making me feel peaceful for the first time in a long time. That was the moment my phone chimed. It was sitting on the table, and I nearly ignored it. Alexander had requested no phones for the evening, but some deep instinct urged me to glance at the screen as he took a sip of wine. The message was from Nathan. I felt the air catch in my throat. I had not communicated with my older brother in 2.5 years, not since the day of our parents' funeral, which he had skipped for a business negotiation in Singapore. I had blocked his number, unable to forgive his absence when I needed him most. This, however, was a new number. The message read, "Do not trust him. A black Honda is waiting outside." The message was brief and to the point, and it struck me with force. I could only stare at the screen. The sound of my own heart pounded in my ears. The low chatter and clinking of the restaurant seemed to fade away, as if my head was submerged in water. "Cass, is everything okay?" Alexander's voice pulled me back to the present. He was looking at me with that familiar expression of concern. His fork paused mid-air. I had to blink and force a smile, pushing the phone aside. "Yes, it is just a work notification. I forgot to silence it." He appeared disappointed. He had a subtle talent for making me feel guilty. "I thought we made a deal about no work tonight." "I know. You are correct. I apologize." I reached for my wine to steady my nerves, but my hand was trembling. The words of the text were echoing in my mind. Do not trust him. After years of silence from Nathan, why would he send this message now? It was deeply unsettling. "I need to use the ladies' room," I said abruptly, standing up before I could lose my nerve. Alexander looked surprised, but simply agreed. "Of course, take your time." I grabbed my handbag and walked toward the back of the restaurant, my heels clicking on the polished floor. The restrooms were located down a corridor. I did not go inside, however. Instead, I found a small window that looked out onto the street. With unsteady hands, I pulled back the curtain and peered into the darkness. A black Honda Accord was parked on the other side of the road, beneath a bare-branched tree. The car window was rolled down, and in the faint street light, I could make out the driver. It was Nathan. He appeared older and broader, but I was certain it was him. A lump formed in my throat. Why was he here now, after so much time had passed? I stood there frozen, filled with a mix of old resentment and new confusion. I also felt a rising sense of dread. A memory surfaced. About a year ago, I was pregnant for the first time. I was 10 weeks into the pregnancy and overjoyed. But then I suffered a miscarriage. I recalled the hospital, the weeks of profound exhaustion, and the peculiar yellow tint of my skin that the doctor dismissed as a result of stress. I recalled Alexander bringing me special vitamins every morning. He claimed they were the absolute best available. And I recalled the stabbing pains in my stomach that I had tried to push through. Alexander insisted that pregnancies were often difficult. And then I recalled all the blood. I pushed the terrible memory from my mind. That was all in the past. It was finished. Alexander and I had grieved together, but we had recovered. We were a happy couple, were we not? Yet I could not shake Nathan's warning. Do not trust him. I moved away from the window and headed back toward our table. My mind was a whirlwind of thoughts. Alexander was now using his own phone, likely checking work emails after he had told me not to. He set his phone down as I approached and smiled. Are you feeling any better? No, not really, I lied, and the words came out with surprising ease. I think I might be getting sick. I am very sorry, Alexander. Can we just go home, please? For a moment, his smile vanished, but he quickly composed himself. Of course. Allow me to settle the bill. I waited as he paid, my pulse racing. One part of me wanted to sit back down and ignore Nathan's message. I wanted to remain in this warm, secure bubble, where the biggest worry was my dinner entree. But another part of me, the part that remembered the illness, the yellow skin, and the pills from Alexander, knew I could not. When we stepped outside, the chilly air was a shock. Alexander reached for my hand, but I pulled away, pretending to search for my keys inside my purse. I will call a taxi for you, he said, pulling out his phone. No, I replied with too much force. He seemed puzzled by my tone. I softened my voice. I just need to get some fresh air. I am going to walk for a bit. I need to clear my head. Cass, it is cold out. Let me at least. I will be fine. I offered him a weak smile and a quick kiss on the cheek. Then I turned and walked away before he could object further. My legs were unsteady as I crossed the street toward the black car. I was walking toward Nathan and toward answers I was terrified to learn. The last thing I heard was Alexander calling my name, his voice filled with confusion. But I did not look back. I could not. If Nathan was correct, then my entire 18-month life with Alexander was a fraud and was about to collapse. When I reached the car, I saw Nathan's grim expression in the shadows. I had a sinking feeling that my life was about to change forever. Nathan's apartment had the scent of leather and old books. It was a large, luxurious space with exposed brick walls and huge windows overlooking the city. I remained standing in the center of his living room. I refused to sit down. My legs felt like jelly. The drive over had been completely silent. Nathan had repeatedly checked his rearview mirror, making sure Alexander was not following us. He was not. But now that I was here with the brother I had erased from my life, I was not sure if I was finally safe or in even greater danger. Nathan was 38 years old now, and with gray starting to appear at his temples, he resembled our father more and more. He motioned toward a large sofa, but I just folded my arms and stood my ground. You have 5 minutes to tell me what is going on, I said to him. He released a long, heavy sigh. I know I have no right to ask you for anything. I'm aware I failed you when our parents died. I was in Singapore closing a deal worth $40 million. I convinced myself I could not leave. The truth is, I was a coward. I was afraid to attend the funeral, afraid to face you. By the time I realized my mistake, you had already changed your number. Good, was my only reply. Nathan flinched at my coldness but did not protest. He just said, You are right, but you must listen to me. I was not even aware you were married until July, just 4 months ago. You disappeared completely. Your social media was locked down and you got a new phone number. I was unable to find you. So I hired a private investigator just to confirm you were okay. When she reported your new name was Cassandra Pierce, I began to feel sick. My jaw tightened. Why? Because 3 years prior in Singapore, a man calling himself Marcus Pierce tried to cheat me. He offered a shipping deal for $15 million, saying he had contacts in Eastern Europe. My partner investigated him, and his entire identity was a fabrication. We cancelled the deal, but I never saw his photograph. I did not know what he looked like until 4 months prior. That is when my investigator ran facial recognition software and found a match with the man you married. His words felt like a physical blow to my stomach. I opened my mouth to object, to tell him he was mistaken, but before I could speak, a door on the far side of the apartment opened. A woman entered the room. She appeared to be in her early 40s, small in stature but with sharp, intelligent eyes, short dark hair, and the direct manner of someone who professionally exposes liars. She was holding a thick manila folder and extended a hand to me. My name is Diana Blackwood. I am the investigator your brother hired. And Miss Morgan, I am deeply sorry to be the one to tell you this, but your husband is not who you think he is. I just stared at her, speechless. That is impossible. His name is Alexander Pierce. We have been married for 2 years. Diana set the folder down on the coffee table. She opened it to reveal photographs, banking statements, and wire transfer receipts. Your husband's legal name is Alex Petro. He is a career con artist who operates under at least 3 aliases. Over the last 5 years, he has defrauded 3 other women of more than $10 million, and he is in the process of doing the same thing to you. The floor seemed to drop out from under me. I fell onto the sofa, my fingers digging into the fabric. How much? Diana's voice was calm and serious. She said he has already taken $3.9 million. He used fake companies to hide it in offshore accounts. But that is not the real prize. On Monday, he plans to use a fake power of attorney. With that paper, he can steal $68 million from your family's trusts. And once that money leaves the country, you will never see it again. Nathan dropped to his knees before me, his eyes pleading. Cass, you have to listen. I realize this sounds crazy, but Diana has been following him for 4 months. It took so long because Alex is impossible to trace. He switches phones every 2 weeks, uses secret email, and rents places through fake businesses. He even changes his appearance, his hair, his weight, his glasses. The changes were small enough that it took our software 2 months to link his face to his other names. Diana handed me a grainy photo from a security camera. The man in it resembled Alexander, but it was not a perfect match. His hair was cut shorter, his glasses were heavier, and his build was different. Daniel Ashford, San Francisco, 2019. He took $4.2 million from his wife, Lauren Mitchell, and vanished. She continued, then he was David Sterling in Seattle, 2020. He stole $2.8 million from Jessica Brennan. 6 months later, she ended her life. A new name appeared, Marcus Caldwell in Austin, 2021. He bankrupted Elizabeth Warren, taking $3.1 million and her restaurant. I could not catch my breath. Why was he never caught? Why did the police not stop him? Because he is smart, Diana answered sharply. Each woman signed legal documents. They signed powers of attorney, investment contracts, and prenuptial agreements. The police considered these family disputes not criminal acts, Diana explained. By the time the victims understood the truth, he had disappeared. He was already in another city with another identity, searching for his next target. Nathan's tone softened. I tried to reach you in August. Your old number was disconnected. I tried your work, but your assistant said Mrs. Pierce was not taking personal calls. I even went to your house. A neighbor said you were traveling with your husband. He isolated you so well. I could not get a message to you without him finding out. So Diana and I were forced to wait. We needed undeniable proof before we could approach you. Diana tapped the folder. 2 days ago, on October 23rd, I accessed his secure email. I discovered a message he sent to his accomplice, Vincent Hayes. The subject was Friday, harvest dinner, move Saturday. That told us he was getting ready for the last big transfer. If we did not come to you tonight, you would have lost everything by Monday. My lungs felt tight, the room started to tilt, and their words felt like a crushing flood. Alexander, Alex, Petro, 4 other victims, $10 million. Jessica Brennan took her own life. A small dark thought inside me whispered that this explained everything. It explained why he had to control all our money. It explained how he slowly removed my friends from my life, giving reasons that always seemed to make sense. It explained why he wanted to get rid of my vitamins after I lost the baby. I had saved those supplements because my gut told me something was off. You have 72 hours, Diana said gently. That is the only time we have. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is on the case, but they have to catch him doing it. Wire fraud is a serious federal offense. They must allow him to attempt the transfer on Monday. That means you have to return home, pretend nothing is wrong, and help us set the trap. My vision blurred with tears as I looked up. You are asking me to go home and lie to my own husband. Nathan squeezed my hand. We are asking you to save yourself. The offices of Pembroke and Associates were located on the 23rd floor of a Boston skyscraper made of glass. At 11 o'clock on a Friday evening, the place was silent like a grave. The only lights came from the main office on the corner. They threw long shadows across a huge wooden desk and rows of leather-bound books that were only for show. Nathan and Diana led me through the deserted reception hall. My heels made a sharp clicking noise on the marble floor, and each sound seemed to bounce off the walls. Edward Pembroke was expecting us at his desk. His glasses sat low on his nose next to a cup of coffee that was now cold. At 67, he had silver hair and intelligent eyes. His peaceful, steady nature was the result of 40 years of fixing problems for others. He had been my parents' attorney, and now he was mine. After my parents died, he helped me navigate the complicated process of managing their estate. I trusted Edward more than anyone. He stood up as I entered, his face full of concern. Cassandra, Nathan called, please sit down. I sank into a big leather chair as a wave of complete exhaustion hit me. Nathan and Diana took seats next to me. Edward returned to his chair and placed his hands on the slim folder Diana had provided. I have reviewed the evidence, Edward stated plainly. It is very strong, it is conclusive. Your husband, Alex Petro, is guilty of wire fraud across multiple states. He works with a partner named Vincent Hayes. Edward continued. Hayes is 61. He lost his law license in California in 2015 for forging client signatures. The two of them have opened 12 overseas accounts in 6 nations. The money trail is complex, but it exists. I tried to swallow past the lump in my throat. So you can arrest him then? You can arrest him right now, tonight? Edward just shook his head slowly. I truly wish we could, but to prove federal wire fraud, the prosecutors must show he planned the crime and then actually did it. At this moment, our evidence is indirect. We have the fake companies, the odd transfers, and the false documents, he explained. If he is arrested now, his lawyers will claim this is a simple marital dispute. He will argue he was just moving money to lower his taxes and that you knew all about it. He will call it a misunderstanding. The entire case will fall apart if we do not catch him trying to make the illegal transfer. So what do we do? I asked, my voice almost silent. We set a trap, Diana said. Tomorrow, Edward will submit an urgent motion to freeze all of Alex's accounts and those of his fake businesses, and it will happen with no prior notice. He will not get any warning at all. On Monday morning, Alex will try to access the accounts and discover they are all frozen. He will panic and call Vincent immediately. They will scramble to find a different method, and that is the moment they will attempt the transfer. Diana continued. The FBI will hear every word. The instant he initiates the transfer, they have got him. Nathan leaned in. But Cass, this plan requires you to go home. You have to act completely normal. You must behave as if you have no reason to doubt him. The idea alone made me feel ill. For how long? 3 days, Edward answered, just until Monday morning. I realize this is an incredible burden, but it is the only path to a conviction. I stared at my hands, imagining walking back into that house. I pictured lying next to Alexander in our bed and smiling at him in the morning, all while he plotted to ruin me. But what if he suspects something? What if he can tell I'm not being honest? That is precisely why we need your permission for surveillance, Edward said. He pushed a stack of documents toward me. The first one is a release for your health information. It will allow Diana and the FBI to review your medical records from October of 2023. He specified, we need the reports from your hospital visit when you had the miscarriage. If Diana is right and Alex meddled with your prenatal vitamins, this could be additional evidence of his entire scheme. I could not breathe. I had not let myself think about that possibility, but now the awful thought filled the room. Second, Edward went on, is a financial disclosure form for our expert accountant. Third, you must consent to federal electronic monitoring. Normally, Massachusetts law requires both parties to agree to a recording. However, a federal case can override state rules. An FBI agent noted they would provide a small device known as a body wire. With it, everything Alexander said could be used as evidence in a federal court. Diana held up a thin black rectangle no bigger than a book of matches. You will wear this beneath your clothes, she instructed. We will be monitoring in real time. If you believe you are in any danger, use the safe word August. We will come for you right away. My hand trembled as I took the pen. I signed the health release, the financial form, and lastly, the consent for surveillance. With each signature, I felt like I was stepping closer to the edge of a tall cliff. Edward gathered the documents. His expression was serious yet compassionate. You are making the right choice, he told me. It may not seem like it at this moment, but you are. When does the freeze on the accounts begin? Nathan asked. Edward glanced at the wall clock. It was nearly 2 in the morning. I will submit the orders electronically within the hour, he replied. The freeze will take effect in the federal system instantly. Alexander will have no idea until he attempts to log in on Monday, he added. Every last account will be completely locked. He will not have access to even 1 cent. I rose to my feet on shaky legs. The sheer pressure of it all felt like a heavy weight on my chest, and I struggled to breathe. I have to leave, I told them. He will start to wonder. Nathan rose to his feet with me. I can give you a ride. I shook my head and said, no. If he is watching and sees your car, he will ask questions. I will take a taxi. Diana handed me a business card with her cell number written on the back. Call me if anything changes, she insisted. Edward walked with me to the door, placing a hand on my shoulder. You are so much stronger than you know, Cassandra. You have survived things most people cannot even imagine. You can handle this. I could only nod, my throat too tight for words, before I stepped into the quiet hall. The elevator ride down seemed to take an eternity. When I walked outside, the sky was just beginning to shift from pure black to a deep dark gray. I raised my hand for a taxi and gave the driver my address. I leaned my head against the cool window glass and closed my eyes. In a few short hours, I had to walk into my house and smile at my husband. This was a man who had been lying to me since the moment we first met. I would have to prepare his coffee and pretend to care about his plans for the weekend. I would have to act like my whole world was not crashing down around me, and I had to hold it together just long enough to see him get exactly what he deserved. The front door unlocked at 7 in the morning. I stepped into our silent Beacon Hill home, my heart beating so hard I feared it would break through my chest. The lights in the kitchen were on. Alexander was awake. Of course, he was awake. I had been gone for nearly 12 hours. He was not the type of person to let that pass without a series of questions. I set my purse on a small table by the entrance. My hands shook as I unfastened the buttons of my coat. The FBI recording device was taped to my chest, right beneath my blouse. The small, hard device felt huge and obvious, like a flashing neon sign. I had practiced my story again and again in the cab. I focused on how I would say the words and the small lies I would add to make it sound real. But now, as I walked toward the kitchen where I knew Alexander was, my story felt incredibly thin and weak. He stood by the coffee maker when I appeared in the doorway. He was in the same clothes as last night, his hair slightly out of place. He appeared worn out and maybe even a little frightened. When his eyes met mine, his expression was a mix of relief and confusion. Cass, my gosh, where have you been? He asked. You left the restaurant, but your purse was still on the chair. I tried calling you all night, but you did not answer. I forced myself to look directly at him and keep my voice steady. I am so sorry. I felt sick and just needed some air. I started walking and suddenly felt dizzy. Nathan happened to be driving by. He saw me and offered to let me rest at his place for a while. Alexander's jaw tightened at the mention of my brother's name. Nathan, he said, like it was a curse. You have not spoken to him in 2 years, and he just happens to be there when you need him. How convenient. It was a coincidence. I moved to the sink to pour a glass of water, buying myself a moment to think. My throat felt like sandpaper. He was on his way home from a late meeting at work. I know you do not like him, but he is my brother. I was not well. What was I supposed to do? Alexander stared at me for what felt like a very long time. It was impossible to guess what was on his mind. Finally, he exhaled deeply and pushed a hand through his messy hair. You should have called me. I would have come to get you. I know, I am sorry, I said, setting down the glass and turning toward him. Last night was just overwhelming. The anniversary dinner, then feeling sick. I think I just panicked. But I am all right now, I promise. He moved closer and gently brushed a strand of hair behind my ear. His touch was soft and familiar, but a chill spread through my entire body. You gave me a real scare, he whispered. I was so worried something awful had happened to you. I made myself lean into his hand and even produced a weak smile. I am fine, truly. We stood there as sunlight streamed into the kitchen. For a brief second, I almost fell for my own performance. I almost let myself think we were just a husband and wife working through a difficult time, that the man before me was not plotting to steal my fortune and disappear. Let me make you some breakfast, Alexander said, taking a step back. You look exhausted. Coffee sounds perfect, I replied. I walked over to the counter to get the familiar coffee press we used every day. My hands were shaking so much I could barely function, so I focused on the simple task of making coffee. I ground the beans, heated the water, and scooped the grounds into the press. The comforting ritual helped steady my nerves. It was something to do other than think about the recording device taped to my chest and the knot of fear in my stomach. As the dark liquid filled the carafe, a memory flashed through my mind. It was from the previous October. I was 10 weeks pregnant and filled with so much joy despite the constant nausea. A deep tiredness had settled into my bones. My skin had a strange yellow tint, but the emergency room doctor dismissed it as stress. Difficult pregnancies happen, he had said. Alexander had been so attentive then. He brought me special prenatal vitamins every morning that he ordered online, insisting they were the absolute best available. I took them without fail, just as he instructed. I took them even when they made me feel awful, and the sharp pains in my stomach grew worse and worse, and then the miscarriage happened. There was so much bleeding, and then the hospital. It left a hollow ache inside me that lingered for months. Now, a year later, I looked at the coffee and felt a sudden, deep chill. What if Nathan was right? What if Diana was right? What if those pills were never vitamins at all? Cass, are you all right? Alexander's voice pulled me from my thoughts. I looked down and saw that I had let the coffee overflow. It was forming a dark puddle on the counter. I quickly grabbed a towel to wipe up the spill. Yes, sorry, I am just so tired. He gently took the coffee press from my hands, his fingers brushing against mine. Why do not you get some rest today? I have some paperwork to review, but we can go out for a late lunch. We could check out that new French place. I saw my opportunity. Paperwork. You mentioned something about the bank the other night. Is there anything you need me to sign? For a fraction of a second, I saw a flicker of something in his eyes. It was a look of quick calculation or maybe just surprise. Then it was gone, replaced by a casual smile. It is just some routine updates for the trust. It is not important. I will handle it. Are you sure? I do not mind, I said, keeping my tone light. I mean, it is my money too. It is probably good for me to know what is going on. It is just tedious legal documents, he said, waving his hand dismissively. Edward's office sent over some files about our assets. I will go through them this weekend. We can discuss it together next week. Do not you worry about it. I smiled back at him and dropped the subject, even though my instincts were screaming at me to push further. Okay, I said, I trust you. He seemed to visibly relax. I know you do, he replied. I picked up my phone as if to check the time. From under the table, I sent a quick text to Nathan. Phase 1 is complete. Then I looked up at Alexander with a cheerful voice. So about that lunch, I am starving. Sounds perfect, he said before kissing my forehead. We spent the morning acting completely normal. He worked on his laptop in his study. I sat on the sofa holding a book without reading a single page. Around noon, with the autumn sun shining, Alexander suggested we start getting ready to go out. Just then, his phone buzzed on the table. He glanced at the screen, and I watched his entire expression shift. The color drained from his face, and his mouth formed a hard, thin line. He stared at his phone for 5 incredibly long seconds. Then he stood up abruptly, turned without a word, and walked quickly into his study. I waited, counting every breath I took until I heard the distinct click of the study door closing. Then I pulled out my own phone. A new message from Nathan had arrived 2 minutes ago. The freeze orders are active. He just got the official email. Prepare yourself. I remained on the couch with the book on my lap, but I was not reading. The entire house was still, almost as if it were holding its breath. Alexander had not emerged from his study. 5 minutes passed, and then 10. The only things I heard were the quiet squeak of his office chair and the low murmur of his voice. I could not make out the words, but his tone was sharp and filled with panic. It was the sound of a man watching his perfect scheme completely unravel. I got up slowly, set the book aside, and walked into the hall. The study door was not fully closed. A thin sliver of light escaped through the crack. As I pressed myself against the wall, I could finally hear his words clearly. All 6 accounts, Alexander said, his voice tight as he paced the room. His footsteps were quick and agitated. Every single one has been frozen. She knows, Vincent. She has to know. He stopped, listening. Vincent's voice was too low for me to hear, but Alexander's next words were like shards of ice. I do not care how this happened. We have 48 hours, maybe less. He paused again. If she contacted a lawyer, no. We switched to plan B on Monday morning. I will tell her it is a system glitch. I will get her to sign the papers in person. The moment she signs, we transfer the money overseas before she even knows what hit her. My heart hammered against my ribs. I wanted to burst into that room and demand he tell me the truth. I recalled Edward's advice. Pretend that everything was normal. Let him think he was still in control. I moved silently from the door and returned to the sofa. Alexander emerged 10 minutes later. I had a book open and my expression was serene. Hey, he said, resting on the doorframe. His smile was forced and his eyes showed concern. I apologize for that. It was just a problem at work. I kept my voice cheerful. Is everything all right? Yes, a customer is unhappy about some forms. It is nothing. He walked to the kitchen and quickly drank some water. I saw that his hand trembled. Are you certain? You appear very tense. He insisted. I am fine. He set the glass down hard. I am actually skipping lunch. I have to focus on this. I nodded as a supportive wife would. Of course, do what you need to do. He returned to his study. The moment the door shut, I reached for my laptop. Edward provided a secure website for me to monitor the accounts. My hands shook as I entered my password. The screen loaded. It displayed 6 accounts. Each one was labeled in red with a single word, frozen. The top 3 were offshore shell corporations. They contained $8 million, $7 million, and $9 million. That came to $24 million. This was money stolen from my business and family over the past 18 months. He created false invoices for services that were never performed. I did not question them because I had faith in him. The remaining 3 accounts contained my parents' money. Alexander persuaded me to let him invest it to reduce taxes. Those accounts held 15 million, 6 million, and 13 million dollars. This meant 44 million dollars were inaccessible since 6 in the morning. The grand total was 68 million dollars. My whole inheritance was locked away. I leaned back, my eyes fixed on the display. A chilling clarity washed over me. It was all true. Nathan and Diana were correct. The man I chose as my husband, who I shared my life with, had intended to take everything from our very first meeting. The remainder of Saturday passed in a haze. Alexander remained in his study. He emerged only for meals or coffee refills. He hardly made eye contact with me. By evening, the tension in our home was unbearable. I claimed to be exhausted and retired for the night. I lay awake until 3 in the morning, hearing his restless pacing below. Sunday dawned cold and overcast. The sky threatened rain. The scent of coffee woke me, and I discovered Alexander in the kitchen. He was already dressed, looking composed but weary. He was hiding his anxiety again. Morning, he offered, handing me a coffee. I clutched the warm cup. Listen, there is something I need to discuss with you. My gut clenched. All right, he began to explain. My investment advisor contacted me. A glitch in the bank's system has frozen many accounts, ours included. It is a minor issue, an easy fix. We just need to go on Monday morning to sign some documents to resolve it. It should not take more than 10 minutes. Are you able to do that? I stared into his eyes and saw pure desperation. He was pretending to be unconcerned, and it made me nauseous that he expected me to accept his lie. He truly believed I was naive enough to walk into the bank and sign it all away. Certainly, I replied, keeping my voice even. What time should we be there? His expression flooded with relief. 10 o'clock. I will arrange the appointment. I made myself smile and drank my coffee. That is perfect. You know I trust you, Alexander. Anything you need. He took my hand and squeezed it. Thank you. I do not know what I would do without you. I squeezed back, my own nails pressing into my palm. The feeling is mutual. As he moved to refill his cup, I sent a fast message to Nathan. Monday, 10 a.m. His response arrived almost instantly. We are prepared. I slipped the phone away and watched Alexander. He was absorbed in his own messages, completely unaware of the situation. He had no idea his trap was about to close on him. While he slept on Sunday morning, I shut myself in the study. The sound of the lock clicking seemed so permanent. My laptop displayed Diana's list of 3 names and numbers. These were other women he had deceived. First was Lauren Mitchell of San Francisco. Her number was 415-555-0147. The time was 10 o'clock in Boston, which meant it was 7 o'clock on the West Coast. I knew the hour was early for a Sunday, but Diana's message said they were expecting me. I made the call before my courage could fail. A woman with a crisp voice answered immediately. This is Lauren. I replied, Hello, I am Cassandra Morgan. Diana Blackwood provided me with your contact information. I apologize for the early hour, but she said you could speak with me about Alexander Pierce. A lengthy pause followed. Then she posed a stunning question. Are you talking about Alex Petrov? The different name caught me off guard. Yes, how long were you married to him? 18 months, I answered. She paused once more. And you are only discovering his true identity now? My throat constricted. Diana's investigation started 4 months ago. I was not told until Friday evening. Lauren let out a sound between a laugh and a sigh. Yes, that is just like him. He is a master at his game. I only learned the truth after he disappeared with all my money. Diana said he took $4.2 million from you. 4.2, Lauren confirmed. Her tone was empty and devoid of feeling. It took him 8 months. We met at a grief counseling group. My husband had passed from a heart attack 6 months earlier. I was lost and vulnerable. Then he appeared, introducing himself as Daniel Ashford. He claimed his own wife had passed from cancer. It felt like he knew my pain perfectly. We were married 3 months after that. I granted him power of attorney 6 weeks later. He claimed it was for estate planning if one of us had an accident. It seemed logical then, Lauren added with a bitter chuckle. Then on a morning in January of 2020, I woke to find him vanished. My bank was drained. All my stocks were liquidated. He even stole my daughter's college fund. I reported it to the police, but they informed me no crime was committed. They explained that since I signed the documents and we were legally married, their hands were tied. But it was all based on lies and theft, I protested. That argument does not get you very far with an overworked prosecutor. Their advice was to hire an attorney and file a lawsuit. The issue was that Daniel Ashford never existed. He had no social security number, no employment history, and no real address. By the time I discovered that, he was already conning his next target, My hands trembled. I am so sorry for what you went through. Lauren's voice hardened. Do not feel sorry. Help me end this. Diana mentioned the Federal Bureau of Investigation is involved with your case. She said you are laying a trap. Is this correct? Yes, I confirmed. Tomorrow morning, he believes I will be signing documents to release the funds, but federal agents will be waiting. The moment he accesses the money, they will take him into custody. Good, she replied. How can I assist? I explained. We require your statement. Diana believes that proving a pattern of this behavior across state lines will create a powerful legal case. This was much bigger than simple fraud. It felt more like a criminal enterprise. I am in, Lauren declared, her voice firm. Anything you need at all. Depositions, court dates, testimony, count me in. He destroyed my life. If I can help put him behind bars, I will do whatever it takes. A huge weight lifted off my shoulders. Thank you. One last thing, Lauren added, her voice dropping slightly. There was someone else. Her name was Jessica Brennan in Seattle. He went to her right after me. Diana may have mentioned her. Jessica is gone. She ended her own life in March of 2021, 6 months after Alex David Sterling took everything from her. I did not learn about her until it was too late. I tried to reach out to her family, but her sister refused to talk to me. I cannot blame her. What words are there for someone whose sister died because of a man you also once trusted? I covered my mouth, fighting back tears. I promise he will pay for what he did to her. I truly hope so, she answered. Our conversation continued for another 10 minutes. Lauren walked me through his entire process, highlighting every red flag she missed. She described how he slowly separated her from her support system. The isolation was so subtle she was unaware until she was completely alone. After we hung up, I felt emotionally exhausted. Yet a new, steely resolve started to build within me. I was not alone in this. Lauren had survived. I could survive too. The following call to Elizabeth Warren in Austin proved to be far harder. Elizabeth answered after the fifth ring, her voice cautious. Hello, Miss Warren. My name is Cassandra Morgan. Diana Blackwood recommended that I contact you. I know who you are, Elizabeth replied. Her voice was guarded and cold. Diana called me. You are his current wife. His former wife, I clarified, and I intend to put an end to his schemes. Well, good luck. I wasted a year of my life on that and got nowhere. I inhaled deeply. I am not attempting this alone. The Federal Bureau of Investigation is handling the case. We have successfully frozen his accounts. They intend to arrest him for wire fraud tomorrow morning. To succeed, we must have witnesses. We need people to prove this is a repeated offense, not a one-time error. Elizabeth did not speak for a long time. Why would I ever do that for you? Why would I want to relive the worst year of my life inside a courtroom full of people? Because Jessica Brennan cannot, I replied. The other end of the line was completely silent. At last she asked, What do you need me to do? I laid out the whole plan for her. By the time I was done, Elizabeth had agreed to testify. Her voice was still brittle and defensive, but she was in. She had lost her restaurant, her entire life's work, and 3 years of therapy had not fixed her inability to trust. But she would do it for Jessica. That evening, Diana called. I told her I have spoken to both of them. They're going to help. Good. There is more you need to know, Diana said cautiously. One of the other women, a Seattle doctor named Margaret Ellis, she is not like the others. She is an undercover FBI agent. We put her in place 18 months ago to monitor Alex's movements and document his methods. The news made my head swim. So this was a federal case all along, since 2022? After Jessica passed away, her sister pushed the Seattle office to reopen the case. They realized it was part of a larger pattern. They have been building a case against him for years. At 8 o'clock that night, Diana started a group text with me, Lauren, and Elizabeth. Lauren's message appeared first. It read, For Jessica. Elizabeth replied immediately, For all of us. I stared at my phone, at the names of 3 women bound together by one man's deception, and I added, Let's go finish this. I barely slept a wink. By 5 on Monday morning, I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling and watching the minutes tick by. 10 o'clock was 4 hours away. Just 4 hours until we sprung the trap. 4 hours until Alexander walked into that bank, so sure of his victory. 4 hours until the FBI had him. 4 hours until everything in my life changed forever. The knock on my door came at 6 in the morning. 3 sharp raps cut through the stillness of the house. I was already awake, sitting at the kitchen table with an untouched cup of tea, just watching the clock. I went to the door and peered through the peephole. My brother Nathan stood on the porch with 2 cups of coffee. In the pale morning light, his face was tired and serious. I unlocked the door. What are you doing here? We need to talk, he said. He handed me one of the cups and stepped inside, his voice dropping to a whisper. Is he still sleeping? I glanced up the staircase. Yes, he is still asleep. What is going on? Nathan moved past me into the living room. He set his coffee on an end table before turning to face me. There are details I should have told you on Friday. Diana and I held back because we did not want to cause you more worry, but you are walking into that bank in a few hours and you deserve to know the whole story. I sank onto the sofa, my heart starting to pound. What story? He sighed deeply, and for a moment he looked far older than his 38 years. When our parents passed away, their attorney handled everything. You inherited it all, the company, the trust funds, this house. I got a much smaller share. I never argued because I figured they wanted one person to run the business, but a few months back, after I brought Diana on, I went through the official court filings. That is when I found it. Found what? I am adopted. The words hung in the air between us. Feeling heavy and impossible, I could only stare at him. What? Mom and Dad never mentioned a thing. They never said anything to either of us, but it is right there in the county records. A sealed adoption from 1986 when I was 2. They treated me like their own son, and I never had a single reason to think otherwise. But legally, I am not their biological child. My mind was racing. Why would they keep that from you? I have no idea. Maybe they were waiting for the right moment and it never came. Or maybe they did not think it mattered. His voice shook slightly, but it mattered a great deal to Alexander. Diana found emails on his encrypted server. He hired a private investigator 2 years ago, right after you started seeing him. That investigator uncovered the adoption records. Alexander intended to use them to contest the will. His plan was to accuse you of manipulating our parents into giving me a smaller inheritance. He was going to paint you as a scheming opportunist. The legal fight would have frozen the estate for years, draining the trusts with lawyer bills. And when it was all settled, he would have already moved the money into an offshore account and vanished. It felt like the floor had just vanished beneath my feet. You are my brother. It makes no difference to me if you are adopted. You will always be my brother. Nathan's eyes grew glassy with emotion. I know, but Alex saw it as a vulnerability, and he has been working on this plan much longer than we thought. How much longer? Nathan pulled out his phone and showed me a file from Diana. 3 years ago, I was in Singapore for a $40 million shipping contract. A man named Marcus Pierce approached me at an industry event. He said he was with a logistics company in Eastern Europe. He offered a deal to cut our shipping costs by 30% if we made an upfront $15 million investment to expand his operations. The whole thing felt too good to be true. My partner ran a background check. Marcus Pierce was a ghost. There were no corporate filings, no tax returns, and his passport was a forgery. We told him to take a hike and reported him to the local police, but he disappeared before they could investigate. My throat went dry. Are you telling me that man was Alexander? I am positive. Diana ran facial recognition on the security footage from that event. It was him. He had different hair and was heavier, but his facial structure and the way he moved were identical. He was testing me, Cass, to see if I was an easy mark. When I did not fall for it, he moved on. And when he found out I had a wealthy younger sister who was about to inherit a fortune, he went to plan B. Why didn't you say something? The question came out sharper than I meant it to. If you knew he conned you 3 years ago. I did not know, Nathan said, his voice laced with pain. I had no picture of him, not even a real name. There was nothing connecting Marcus Pierce to Alexander Pierce until Diana's software found a match. By then, you had been married to him for over a year. I tried to reach you last August. I dialed your old cell, but the number was disconnected. I called your work, but was told that Mrs. Pierce was not taking personal calls. I even came to the house, but a neighbor said you were traveling with your husband. He had completely isolated you from everyone. I could not get to you without tipping him off. So Diana and I decided to wait until we had undeniable proof. My hands were shaking again. He started planning this in Singapore, or maybe even before that. Nathan then showed me another file. It was a grainy image of a little girl on a sailboat at a summer camp smiling for the camera. For a second, I did not recognize the person in the photo. Then I realized it was me. Diana said she found it in Alexander's cloud storage. It was from 15 years ago in Bar Harbor, Maine. I was 17 years old at the sailing camp my parents sent me to. Alexander was working there as a guest instructor. He kept that picture of me, Cass. He had been watching me since I was a teenager. The whole room felt like it was tilting. I grabbed the couch to steady myself. Sickness rose in my throat. That cannot be possible. He is more than just a con man. He is a predator. Diana found a spreadsheet on his computer with 23 names on it. All were the children of wealthy families he met between 2008 and 2015. My name had a special comment next to it. It said, "Wait for inheritance." I could not breathe. The man I had married, the man I loved, stalked me for 15 years, just planning his attack, and I had walked right into his trap without a clue. Nathan knelt in front of me and held my hands. You did not know. There was no way you could have known. But you know now, and in 4 hours, we are going to stop him. Before I could answer, my phone buzzed on the coffee table. I picked it up, feeling completely numb inside. It was a notice from my doctor's office. Lab results are available. Pregnancy test. My fingers trembled as I tapped the message. The result was positive, estimated 6 weeks. My entire world came to a halt. I was pregnant. Nathan saw the expression on my face change. Cass, what is it? I could not speak, so I just gave him the phone. He read the screen and his concerned look turned to pure horror. Oh my goodness. My mind was racing, trying to connect the pieces. 6 weeks ago was the middle of September. My husband Alexander and I were trying again after my miscarriage, or so I thought. What if losing our first baby was not just a terrible accident? What if he made it happen? I could not even complete the thought. Nathan spoke with quiet urgency. We need to tell Diana and Edward this changes the whole plan. How? My voice was barely a whisper. How could this possibly change anything? He will use this pregnancy against you if he knows. Custody battles, parental rights. It is just another way for him to have control, even from jail. I stared down at the phone. The good news on the screen felt like a prison sentence. In just 4 hours, I had to go into a bank and face the man who had been my shadow since I was 17. The same man who gave me poison, stole my fortune, and lied about our entire life, and I was carrying his child. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely put the phone down. I stood up and walked to the stairs before Nathan could react. A single, terrible possibility had taken over my mind. I had to know if it was true. I needed the answer before I lost my courage. Cass, wait a minute. Nathan was right behind me, his voice low with worry. What are you doing? I could not tell him, not just yet. I went into our bedroom, past the perfectly made bed where my husband had slept alone, and walked to the closet. On the top shelf, hidden behind a stack of winter clothes, was a small wooden box from my mother. I reached for it and carried it to the sitting room, safely away from the bedroom. Nathan followed me and softly closed the door. What is in that box? I was only able to say one word: proof. I sat down on the small couch and opened it. Inside were the keepsakes I could not throw away after the miscarriage. There was a fuzzy ultrasound photo of a tiny shape at 8 weeks, a hospital bracelet from Massachusetts General from October 15th, the night our baby died. Underneath everything, wrapped in tissue paper, was a pill bottle. The label said prenatal complex premium formulation. I held the bottle and its weight felt like a silent accusation. Alexander had wanted to throw this away right after I lost the baby. He said we had to get rid of the painful reminders to heal. But something stopped me. Maybe it was grief, or maybe some part of me already knew something was terribly wrong. I secretly took it from the trash and hid it. Nathan just stared at the bottle. Do you think he poisoned you? I do not know. My fingers shook as I unscrewed the cap. Inside were about a dozen green and white capsules. They looked exactly like the ones I took every morning. But now I was about to learn the truth. I got my phone and searched for forensic toxicologists near Boston. The first result was a Dr. Raymond Keller, who was with the Massachusetts State Police Crime Lab. I called his office and a woman answered on the third ring. I have to speak with Dr. Keller. It is an emergency. He is in a meeting at the moment. Can I take a message for him? Tell him it is about a poisoning. It involves prenatal vitamins used to cause a miscarriage. I need him to run a test today. There was a short pause. Then please hold. After 2 minutes, a man's sharp professional voice came on the line. This is Dr. Keller. You mentioned a miscarriage. I quickly told him the whole story: the loss of the baby, the special vitamins Alexander provided, and the strange symptoms I had dismissed back then. Dr. Keller listened to me without interruption. When I finished, he said, Can you text me photos of the bottle and the pills? I need clear pictures of the label and the capsules. I sent them. My hands felt steadier now that I had something to do. 5 minutes later, he was on the phone again. Morgan, I am looking at your photos. This label is fake. It is missing an FDA approval number, a batch code, and a manufacturer's address. Also, these capsules look like they were filled by hand. The powder is not evenly mixed. Do you still have the pills? Yes, I have all of them. I did not take any after the miscarriage. I want you to overnight me 3 capsules. I will run a complete phytochemical analysis. But based on what you have told me, I am almost certain what we are dealing with. What is it? Pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. Both are herbs that can terminate a pregnancy. People have used them for hundreds of years, but they are extremely dangerous. Pennyroyal is well known for causing severe liver damage. If you were given these for several weeks, it would explain your fatigue, nausea, and stomach pain. At 10 weeks pregnant, that dosage would have almost certainly caused a miscarriage. The room began to spin. I grabbed the couch to support myself. The hospital ran tests, a toxicology screen. They found nothing. A standard emergency room screening does not check for herbal substances. They look for alcohol, illegal drugs, heavy metals, and other typical poisons. To find something like pennyroyal, a special phytochemical test is needed. It costs about $2,000 and takes 3 to 5 days. Doctors do not order it without a good reason to suspect herbal poisoning. Nathan had been silent, but he finally spoke. What about her liver? She said she was tired and had pain. Would her blood test show anything? Absolutely. If Miss Morgan has her hospital records from October 2023, I can review them. I opened the patient website on my phone, the one Diana had helped me access. The discharge papers were there, and I emailed them to Dr. Keller. I could hear him typing, and then he let out a soft whistle. Your ALT level was at 7,268. A normal level is under 40. This indicates mild to moderate liver damage. The emergency room doctor probably assumed it was from the stress of pregnancy, which is a fair conclusion if you do not have all the facts. But given your timeline and symptoms, this is a perfect match for pennyroyal poisoning. You were very lucky you stopped taking those pills. A few more weeks could have caused complete liver failure. I closed my eyes as the awful truth clicked into place. Last October, I was 10 weeks pregnant and filled with so much joy, even as my body was shutting down. The bone deep exhaustion, the yellow tint to my skin the nurse ignored, the sickness that was far worse than any morning sickness. And every morning, Alexander would bring me those pills with juice and a kiss. You must take care of yourself, my love. The baby needs his mother to be strong. I had trusted him with my life, and he was slowly taking our child's life, one pill at a time. Send me the pills, Dr. Keller said. My lab will send you a full report. If you need it for a court case, I can testify as an expert witness. Thank you. My voice was barely a whisper. I ended the call and looked at Nathan. His face was a mix of disbelief and rage. He murdered your baby. I could only nod, unable to form words. My hands moved to my stomach, where a new life just 6 weeks along was growing like a delicate secret. This baby. He did not know about this one yet. This one I would protect. We are not telling him, I said, a new fire in my voice. Not about this pregnancy, not until after he is arrested. He will just find a way to use it against me if he knows. He always finds a way. Nathan agreed. But Cass, you need to be very careful. If he offers you anything, vitamins, food, anything at all, do not accept it. I will not eat a single bite he prepares. I will not drink anything that I did not pour with my own hands. I stood up and put the bottle of pills in my pocket. I am going to that bank. I am going to watch him lose everything he has. And after they cuff him, I am going to tell him that I am pregnant. I need him to know exactly what he has lost. A happy, oblivious voice called from downstairs. Cass, darling, it is nearly 10. Are you all set to go, Alexander? I met Nathan's gaze and he gave my shoulders a reassuring squeeze. You can do this. I gave a small nod, pulled myself up, and headed for the door. I walked straight toward the man who had been secretly harming me, the man whose world I was about to help dismantle. This child was going to survive. I would make sure of it. The drive to the financial district took a silent 12 minutes. The only noise came from the city streets and Alexander's phone clicking softly. I sat still, my wedding ring catching the autumn light. I had picked a navy blue suit for this day. It was an outfit that said I was capable, not afraid. I could feel his satisfied glances from the driver's seat. He was certain I was playing the part of a loving, supportive wife. He had no idea I was also performing a role in his own ruin. The Boston Private Bank occupied the ground floor of a sleek glass tower on Federal Street. It was a place of gleaming marble, hushed conversations, and wealth so old it never needed to be loud. I had come here often to go over my investments with my financial advisor. Today felt entirely different. Now, the security guard, the receptionist, and the cameras all seemed to be watching only me. They were alert and ready, and for good reason because the FBI was inside. They were posing as tellers and computer technicians. One might have been the man in the sharp suit who just strode past holding a briefcase. My husband thought he was about to steal my entire fortune. He had no idea I was setting a trap for him. My phone vibrated with a text from Diana. We are set. Just act normal. Stick to the script. Alexander glanced at his watch and said Vincent would be here any second. Right on time, the elevator doors opened and a man appeared. He looked to be in his early 60s with neatly slicked silver hair. He moved with the confidence of a man used to expensive places. His dark suit was clearly very expensive. His smile was a practiced lie, the kind meant to earn your trust. Alexander, it is good to see you. After they shook hands, Vincent turned to me. And you must be Mrs. Pierce, he finished. Vincent Hayes. I am the financial advisor Alexander mentioned. It is a pleasure to finally meet you. His handshake felt strong, but I saw a small bead of sweat on his forehead. His thumb tapped a nervous rhythm on his briefcase, a small giveaway of his anxiety. I knew all about him from Diana's investigation. Vincent Hayes, 61 years old, was a disgraced lawyer from California and an expert at fraud. Alexander had promised him a 40% cut. I forced a smile and played my part. Thank you for coming so quickly. Alexander said it was a simple technical issue. That is right, Vincent said smoothly. A minor paperwork problem. We can resolve it very fast. He gestured to the elevator. Shall we go up? The ride to the third floor passed in complete silence. I focused on my breathing, knowing that every word and every move was being recorded. The federal wire hidden under my blouse felt heavy against my skin. The meeting room had glass walls and fancy leather chairs. The view of the water should have been relaxing, but my heart was hammering inside my chest. Mr. Chambers, a senior bank manager, was already waiting. He had a stack of papers arranged on the polished table. Mrs. Pierce, Mr. Pierce, Mr. Hayes, please have a seat. Chambers was in his 50s and very polite, a skill he used to make every client feel special. He had no clue what was about to happen, only I did. Vincent opened his briefcase, removed a file, and pushed it across the table to me. As I told Alexander, a computer glitch froze some accounts. It is because of a new security rule from September. It is a little overcautious, I believe, but it is fixable. To sort this out, we just need Mrs. Pierce to sign here to release the accounts and approve our new tax plan. Chambers glanced over the papers and nodded. This all looks to be correct. Mrs. Pierce, by signing these, you will release the funds. It also consolidates everything into one large trust for your estate. The total amount is $68 million. I must confirm that you understand what this means. I looked at him directly, my voice steady. I understand completely. My husband takes care of our finances. I have always trusted him. The words felt like poison, but I said them perfectly. Chambers pushed the documents toward me, and I picked up the pen. I was surprised that my hand was not shaking. I signed all 3 pages, setting the trap my husband had laid for me. Then, exactly as Edward had instructed, I added a small note on the very last page. It read, "Signed with advice from my lawyer Edward Pembroke Esquire, October 28, 2024. Neither Vincent nor Alexander noticed, but in a van nearby, the federal agents would see it as my signal. Excellent, Vincent said, grabbing the papers with clear relief. Mr. Chambers, we should set up the transfer. For tax purposes, can we get it done today? Chambers looked at his monitor. We can schedule it for 2:15. This will give our team time to process the paperwork. Perfect. Alexander reached for my hand across the table. Thank you, darling. I know you hate dealing with paperwork. I managed a fake smile and let him hold my hand, though his touch made me feel sick. Anything for you, my love. The meeting ended quickly after that. Chambers walked us to the elevator and said he would confirm the transfer. Vincent left for another meeting, leaving Alexander and me alone. Inside the elevator, once the doors closed, Alexander hugged me and kissed the top of my head. I could not do this without you. Me neither, I said quietly. While he checked his phone, I sent a quick text to Nathan. The trap is set. 2:15 p.m. The reply came back instantly. We are prepared. We stepped out into the bright afternoon and Alexander hailed a cab, still smiling, with no idea of what was coming. In 3 hours, he thought he would wire $68 million overseas. In 3 hours, federal agents would surround him. In 3 hours, my nightmare would finally be over. I sat beside him in the taxi, watching the city go by, waiting for the moment of his arrest. The surveillance van had the faint smell of old coffee. It was a cramped, hot space parked near my house, made to look like a work truck. It was filled with enough electronic equipment to run a small television station. I was wedged between Nathan and Edward on a small bench. I watched several screens that showed different angles of my home office. Alexander was sitting at the desk I bought him for our anniversary. He did not know the FBI was recording every key he pressed. Agent Lisa Montgomery turned from the driver's seat to face us. She was in her early 40s with sharp eyes and the calm confidence that comes from 15 years of experience. She was in charge of the entire sting operation. With just 1 hour to go, she reviewed the plan with us one last time. At 2:15, Alexander will log on and initiate 2 transfers. The first, for $5.8 million to a company in the Cayman Islands, will appear to go through. He will get a success message and a transaction ID. It will all seem perfectly fine, but the money will not be going anywhere. I leaned in closer. How? The Bank of New York Mellon processes these types of transfers. That is standard. The money has to pass through them first. We have a federal order waiting in their system. The instant the $5.8 million arrives, it is frozen. The whole thing takes only 90 seconds. But on his computer, he will think he just sent almost $6 million out of the country. Edward nodded in agreement. And the second transfer for 62.2 million to an account in Switzerland. We will block that one immediately, Montgomery said. No fake success message, just a large red error that reads transaction denied. That is when he will start to get nervous. Nathan's hands were clenched into fists. What if he tries to run? Montgomery shook her head. He will not. I have studied men like him for 15 years. He is a classic narcissist. He will assume it is a simple technical problem that he can easily fix. He has used you to clean up his messes before, and he will try to do it again. He will call Vincent. They will try to find another way. He will probably try to charm you into signing more papers. He is so certain that he controls you. He cannot imagine you are behind all of this. A feeling of cold justice washed over me. So we just wait. We wait, Montgomery confirmed. The moment he begins that first transfer, we can arrest him for federal wire fraud. With 19 different charges across 4 states, he will go to prison for the next 30 years. The final hour passed by very slowly. I watched the clock on the screen get closer to 2:15. My heartbeat grew faster with each passing second. Alexander was pacing around his office on the phone. At one point, he looked up toward the hidden camera and I held my breath. He can't see us, Nathan whispered. He does not know. At 2:14, Alexander sat down and opened his computer. Montgomery moved closer to the monitors. She spoke quietly into her microphone to the team waiting nearby. Stand by. The target is logging into the bank. I dug my nails into my palms. 2:15. His fingers typed quickly and a new screen showed us exactly what he was seeing. The bank's website loaded. He went to the transfer section. I watched the cursor move over the first line item. $5,800,000 to Petrov Holdings in Grand Cayman. He clicked the confirm button. A green message appeared on his screen. Transfer successful. It even showed a transaction number and an arrival time of 4 to 6 hours. But on our screen, the message was completely different. Funds intercepted. Federal seizure order active. We have him, Montgomery whispered. The first transfer is frozen. He just committed a federal crime on video. Alexander was already beginning the second transfer, $62,200,000 to a trust in Zurich. He clicked confirm. The monitor flashed a bright red warning. The transfer was denied. His account was now completely frozen. I saw the color drain from his face. He stared at the screen, shocked, before his fingers started typing furiously, trying to undo the block. It was no use. He grabbed his phone, his voice tight with panic. Vincent, it is locked. All of it. The Swiss transfer failed and I cannot get through to compliance. He paused. I do not know what went wrong. The first one cleared. I saw it. But the second one... He paused again. No. Cassandra is unaware. She signed the papers this morning. She has no idea. In my ear, Montgomery's voice was calm and clear. BNY Mellon has confirmed the funds were intercepted. The seizure order is complete. We have him on 19 counts of wire fraud on video. There are 4 known victims. Tactical team, you are approved to make the arrest. Go now. The reply crackled in our headsets. Understood. Entering in 30 seconds. But before the final command was given, I stood up. Wait! Everyone stared at me. Montgomery looked confused. Miss Morgan? I need 5 minutes with him alone. Nathan grabbed my arm. Cass, that is a terrible idea. He might hurt you. He will not. He thinks I am still in the dark. I need him to admit to everything on tape. The other women, the money, and... I stopped, my hand moving to my stomach. All of it. Agent Montgomery studied my face for a moment. The recorder is on. Anything he says is evidence. But if you feel you are in danger, say the word August. We will move in instantly. Do you get it? I nodded. Yes. Edward squeezed my shoulder gently. You do not have to go through with this. I must. I met his eyes, my voice suddenly strong. He has to know that I know the truth. I need to say it right to his face, and then I will watch his whole world fall apart. Montgomery spoke into her radio. Hold positions. Cassandra Morgan is approaching the target. Wait for my signal. I stepped out of the van into the crisp October air. The sun felt harsh, the wind sharp. I walked 2 blocks to my house. With a trembling hand, I put the key in my own front door and went in. I could hear Alexander's panicked voice from his office on the phone with Vincent. I took a slow, deep breath, stood tall, and walked toward the man who had lied to me since the beginning. I was ready to make him hear the truth. Before I tell you what happened in that room, I need to know you are still with me. Type the word justice in the comments if you want to find out what happened. Please know the next part of this story is very intense. This is your chance to stop listening. But if you are ready for what comes next, let us go on. I stood in the doorway of our home office. I watched the man I once loved ruin his own life. Alexander was hunched over at his desk. His hair was a mess and his clothes were wrinkled. He kept refreshing the banking website as if that could change the facts. He did not hear me come into the house. The quiet was heavy. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, painting everything in shades of gold. For a moment, I just watched him. I could feel the small microphone taped to my skin. I knew that every single word said in this room would be used as evidence in a federal case. I thought about the new baby just 6 weeks along and so very fragile. Then I thought about our first baby, the one Alexander murdered using pills he made himself. And I stepped into the office. Alex, he looked up and the relief on his face was so genuine it was almost funny. Thank goodness you are back. He started walking toward me, reaching out his hands for mine. We have a glitch in the system. The bank is holding the big transfer. I need you to call Mr. Chambers to give his approval. He stopped talking suddenly. He saw something in my face that made him stop moving. It is over, Alex. My words filled the silence. I watched his expression change from confused to a quick flash of fear, and then to a cold realization that made his face look like it was carved from stone. What are you talking about? He asked me. I took one more step into the room. My heart was racing, but my voice was steady. Daniel Ashford, David Sterling, Marcus Caldwell, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, Jessica Brennan. I let the names hang in the air. I know everything. I know about every lie, every person you hurt, and every dollar you have stolen. He stared at me for a long moment. Then his friendly expression completely disappeared. I saw the man he really was for the first time. He was not a loving husband or a partner, but a monster. He let out a low, ugly laugh. Lauren tried this, Elizabeth tried this. They went to the police, hired lawyers, and screamed about it. You know what happened? Absolutely nothing. Because every one of you signed the contracts, investment authority, marriage license, everything. It is all perfectly legal and on paper. No crime was ever committed. Jessica did not try, I said quietly. She took her own life. His laughter died. The silence between us felt heavy. And you killed our baby. His eyes became narrow. Prove it. I pulled the vitamin bottle from my pocket. I held it up so he could see the green and white pills rattling around inside. I kept this after I lost the baby. You told me to throw it away, but I could not. 3 days ago, a crime lab tested these pills. 70% of the contents were prenatal vitamins. 30% was pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. Both of them are poisons that will cause a miscarriage. You made these pills yourself, Alex. You filled each one by hand. You gave them to me every single morning for weeks until our baby was dead. His face was completely blank. Then, to my horror, he smiled. That child would have created a problem, he said, his voice disturbingly calm. You were already becoming suspicious. You were asking questions, and you were talking to your brother again. A baby is a variable I cannot control. It would have tied you to me forever, even after you learned the truth. So I dealt with it. It was just a business decision. A cold wave of shock washed over me. Every single word was being recorded. Every single one of his cold, calculated admissions was being recorded. I kept my voice steady. And what about this? I rested a hand on my belly. I noticed his gaze follow the gesture. I am 6 weeks along, Alex. You planned this, did you not? A smile spread across his face. In that moment, I finally saw his true nature. He was not just a con man, but a predator who had targeted me since I was 17. It is an insurance plan, he said. He sounded pleased, as if explaining a brilliant strategy. If you left me, I would fight for custody. I would tie up your money in court for years. And if I got caught, a father still has rights. I could make your life a nightmare, even from a jail cell. I would bury you in legal papers and demand to see our child. You would never be rid of me as long as we had a child connecting us. My hands trembled, but I kept my voice firm. You are no father, you are a monster. I am a businessman, he corrected, leaning back against the desk. He folded his arms, wearing that terrible smirk. And you have been my most successful project. 15 years I spent planning, observing you, waiting for your parents to be gone. I set myself up perfectly. I used Nathan in Singapore, the sailing camp for status, and the grief group to get near you. Then came the romance and our wedding. Every move was planned. It all would have gone perfectly if your brother had not hired that private investigator. It is not going to work, I told him. You are done. He laughed again, this time like he was truly enjoying himself. Am I? Do you really think the law cares? You signed all of the documents, Cassandra. You gave your approval for every single transfer. Your name is on everything. You look more like my accomplice than my victim. I am not your accomplice. I moved closer, my voice low and clear, because while you were busy with your scheme, I was making my own plans. I have been working with the Federal Bureau of Investigation, a federal prosecutor, and 3 other women you have hurt. For the last hour, you have been confessing to everything on a federal wiretap. Every word has been recorded, every admission has been logged, and in 30 seconds, a federal team is going to break down that door and arrest you. They will charge you with wire fraud, identity theft, conspiracy, and the poisoning that caused the death of our unborn child. You are going to prison for 35 years, Alex, and you will never touch this child. All the color drained from his face. He glanced at the window, maybe thinking about running. That is when I heard the sound of boots on the porch and then the loud crack of the door being forced open. Voices yelled, "Federal agents!" Alexander turned to me, his eyes full of shock and rage. "You!" The office door burst open. 4 federal agents in full tactical gear rushed inside. Agent Montgomery followed them, her voice calm and authoritative. "Alexander Petrov, you are under arrest for wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, and for the violation of federal law 18 USC section 1841, which resulted in the death of an unborn child. You have the right to remain silent." They pulled his arms behind his back and fastened the handcuffs. I watched it all happen as if from a great distance. This was the man who took my child, who hunted me for 15 years and who thought he owned me. And now he was being led out of my house in handcuffs, his face paled with shock as his entire world fell apart. As they walked him past me, he leaned close and spoke in a low whisper meant only for me. "You will never be able to prove the part about the baby." I looked him directly in the eye and gave him a tiny smile. "I already have." The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Boston office filled 3 floors of a concrete building downtown. It was a world of harsh lights, worn carpets, and a feeling of serious, urgent business. I was in a small meeting room on the 4th floor with a bad cup of coffee growing cold. Through a one-way mirror, I watched them process Alexander Petrov down below. He looked so much smaller now without his expensive suit jacket, his hands cuffed as a technician rolled his fingerprints onto an ink pad. Vincent Hayes was being processed in another room. His perfect silver hair was a mess and his face was white with sweat. Neither man said a thing. They did not even make eye contact. The partnership that had stolen millions of dollars and destroyed lives was already crumbling under the weight of federal charges. Nathan sat beside me, his hand resting on my shoulder. Edward stood near the door holding his briefcase, our lawyer already planning the next steps. Agent Montgomery came in with a laptop and a sealed evidence bag. "Miss Morgan, I am going to need that vitamin bottle." I took it from my jacket pocket and handed it to her. Montgomery logged it into evidence for case 24 CR 10847, Commonwealth versus Petrov. Item 14A, a prenatal vitamin bottle with evidence of tampering, and she gave it to a forensics specialist waiting in the hall. "Our lab will have confirmation of Dr. Keller's results in 48 hours, said Montgomery, taking a seat opposite me. "But his report, plus the taped confession, is more than enough. We can charge Petrov with delivering a harmful substance under Federal Code 18 USC Section 1841, the Unborn Victims of Violence Act. That is an entirely separate crime. It carries a sentence of up to 20 years. I just nodded, a lump in my throat making it impossible to speak. Montgomery turned her laptop toward me. "I want you to hear this. I need you to know that it is clean, that it will hold up in court, and that it is undeniable." She pressed play, and Alexander's voice echoed in the room, sounding as cool and ordinary as it had in my own house just an hour before. "That baby would have complicated things, so I took care of it. It was a simple business decision. I closed my eyes and forced myself to listen. It served as an insurance policy. If you had tried to leave me, I would have taken you to court for custody. I would have drained your accounts for years. Even from prison, I could have made your life a living hell." Montgomery stopped the audio. "Every single word is time-stamped, authenticated, and backed up on 3 separate servers. His attorneys will fight to have it dismissed, but it will not work. You were in your own home. He was not in custody, and a federal warrant approved the recording. This is flawless, admissible evidence." "What about the money?" Edward inquired. "The $5.8 million he sent to the Cayman Islands." Montgomery pulled up another screen showing a transfer record from the Bank of New York Mellon. "The money never left New York. The instant it hit the bank's clearing system, our seizure warrant was triggered and the funds were frozen." On his end, Petrov received a success message, a confirmation number, and an arrival date. But in reality, federal agents had already taken control of it. It is a common procedure for stopping international wire fraud. He committed a crime the second he hit the confirm button. Everything after that just piled on more proof. She then showed a pharmacy record from a CVS on Beacon Hill from August 7th. We also reviewed his prescription history. Your doctor prescribed birth control for you in July. Petrov picked up the refill in August with your insurance information. However, your medical history shows you never received those pills. He intentionally stopped your birth control to get you pregnant. This is known as reproductive coercion. It can be hard to prove, but his own confession on tape makes it a definite win for us. I stared at the pharmacy slip, at Alexander's signature on the line, and a quiet rage began to build inside me. Every move he made was part of a scheme. Every sweet word was a lie. Even the child I was carrying was just another piece in his game. What are the specific charges he will be facing? Nathan asked. Montgomery presented a formal charging sheet. It was a 20-page document filled with legal terms that outlined their entire case. There are 27 counts of wire fraud under 18 U.S.C. Section 1343. Each fraudulent transfer that went across state or national lines counts as a separate charge. We have traced wires to fake companies in the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, and Switzerland. We also tracked domestic transfers that paid for his criminal operations. There are 8 counts of identity theft under Section 1028. He operated under 4 different aliases over 5 years, creating false papers and fake businesses. There is 1 count of a RICO conspiracy under Section 1962. He and Vincent Hayes operated a criminal enterprise with a long history of illegal acts. We also have 1 charge under the Unborn Victims of Violence Act for what he did and 1 charge of bigamy. Bigamy? I looked at her stunned. He is married to someone else? Montgomery's face remained impassive. We are still verifying the details, but Interpol has a marriage certificate from Prague. A woman named Elena Petro married Alexander Petro in 2012. They have 2 kids. She has been attempting to divorce him for 6 years, but he has ignored all the legal documents. According to both Czech and American law, that marriage is still valid. That means any marriage after that, including yours, is legally void. The room felt like it was tipping over. I put a hand on the table to keep my balance. He has children, 2 children, a son who is 10 and a daughter who is 8. Elena teaches school in Prague. She last saw him in 2018. He just walked out on them. Nathan swore under his breath. Edward's expression became a mask of stone. I felt something inside me shatter. It was more than just sadness, it was a terrible new clarity. I was not the only woman whose life Alexander had built just so he could destroy it. I was not the second or even the third. Another wife and 2 children were on the other side of the world. They had been waiting 6 years for a husband and father who had no intention of returning. What will happen with Vincent? Edward asked quietly. Montgomery glanced over at the booking area where Vincent sat hunched in a chair, his attorney talking to him intensely. We have offered him a plea agreement. If he cooperates fully and testifies, he is looking at 15 years, with possible parole in 10. He will also have to pay back $2 million. If he refuses the deal, he faces a minimum of 30 years. His lawyer is smart, he will take it. Just then, as if on cue, Vincent's attorney stood, came to the observation window, and gave Montgomery a single sharp nod. She nodded back. He took the deal, Montgomery confirmed. That means we have a witness who is on our side. He can speak to 47 forged documents, 12 foreign bank accounts, and his 6-year criminal partnership with Petrov. He will detail how they shared the money, their planning meetings, how they selected their targets, and he has already admitted to buying the poisons that Petrov used on you. My vision started to swim. My mind went back to the 10 weeks I had carried my first baby. I recalled the hope and the fear and the love for a life that Alexander was ending from the very beginning. I thought of the new baby inside me now, only 6 weeks old, unaware of the battle being waged for its future. How long will he be gone? I asked. For Alexander? How many years will he get? Montgomery looked me straight in the eye. With a conviction on just half these charges, he is facing a minimum of 35 years. There will be no possibility of parole. He will spend the rest of his life in prison. I slowly nodded. It did not feel like it was enough. It could never be enough, but it was a beginning. Montgomery closed her laptop and stood. There is one more thing you should know. His true wife was named Elena Petrov and she lived in Prague. At that very moment, Interpol was making contact. They had to inform her about the arrest, the criminal accusations, and the bigamy. Her testimony would be incredibly powerful if she chose to help. A legal wife speaking out about his abandonment of her and their children would be devastating. Her story of fraud during their marriage would eliminate any pity a jury might have for him. Do you think she will agree to it? Nathan asked. Montgomery answered truthfully, I am not certain, but if I were her, I would want a front row seat to see him face justice. 3 days after his arrest, I was back in that FBI conference room in Boston, just staring at a blank video screen. It was a cold, gray Wednesday, and the silence in the building felt heavy. Agent Montgomery was coordinating with Interpol. Nathan was beside me, his leg bouncing nervously. A woman's face then appeared on the monitor. She seemed younger than I had imagined, with dark hair and a look of deep exhaustion. She sat in a simple white room with an interpreter. This was the 39-year-old Elena Petrov, Alexander's real wife. Montgomery began gently, "Thank you for agreeing to speak with us. I understand this is very difficult." Elena simply nodded, her hands clasped. Her English was accented but clear. "I want to help. I need to stop him if he has harmed other women." Montgomery gestured toward me. "This is Cassandra Morgan. She married Alexander in 2023. Elena's eyes met mine, and I saw a shift in her expression. It was not anger, but a deep, sorrowful understanding. "I know," she said. "Interpol explained everything. I am so sorry." My throat felt tight. "I never knew about you or your children." Elena's voice was soft. "No one ever did. That is how he operates. He convinces each of us that we are the only one." Montgomery opened a file. "Could you tell us about your marriage from the beginning until he disappeared?" Elena took a steadying breath. "We met in 2010. I was an English teacher in Prague. He told me he was a consultant for a shipping company. He was charming and showered me with attention. We were married in 2012. I was pregnant with our son David. He said it was the honorable thing to do." Her voice started to shake. "David was born in 2014. Our little girl Sophia came along in 2016. Alexander's job required a lot of travel to places like London, Singapore, and New York. He would be gone for weeks at a time, but always came home with gifts and amazing stories. I really believed we were building a future." "When did he abandon you?" Montgomery asked. "It was July of 2018. He claimed he had a contract in Boston that would last 3 months. He kissed the children goodbye. He swore he would call us every week." Elena's face hardened. "I did not get a single phone call from him. His number was out of service. I filed for divorce in 2019, but they could never find him to serve the papers. He just disappeared." I could feel my own eyes starting to tear up. "You have been raising them alone this entire time." "I have two jobs now, as a teacher and a tutor. My parents give me a lot of help with David and Sophia." "We are managing." Elena's voice became strong. "But for 6 years, my son has kept asking when his dad is coming back." Montgomery leaned in. "Miss Petrov, I have something you need to know. Alexander did more than just leave you. Between 2019 and now, he conned 4 other women in America. Lauren Mitchell from San Francisco. He called himself Daniel Ashford and took $4.2 million. Jessica Brennan from Seattle, using the name David Sterling, lost $2.8 million. She took her own life just 6 months after he disappeared. Elizabeth Warren from Austin, as Marcus Caldwell, lost $3.1 million. And then there was Cassandra. Eleanor just looked at the monitor, her face turning pale. "Jessica committed suicide." "Yes," Montgomery quietly confirmed. "That was in March of 2021. She left a diary." Eleanor clenched her hands into tight fists. "He was doing all of this while I was here raising his children, while I worked 2 different jobs, while David cried for him every night. I could not help but speak up. I am so incredibly sorry. I never knew you existed. And what if you had known?" Elena asked, but her tone was not harsh. "He lied to all of us. You are just as much a victim as I am." Montgomery chose his words carefully. "Miss Petrov, we are going to need your testimony at his trial. Your marriage license and the children's birth records are proof of bigamy. All his other marriages after yours are not legally valid. Your story will prove this goes beyond simple fraud. This shows a pattern of destroying whole families." Elena looked straight at me, then she nodded. "I will do it. For Jessica, for you, and for my own kids. They have to learn their father is not a good man who simply forgot them. He is a criminal who left them on purpose." The federal charges were updated later that day. They included a count of bigamy. Alexander's marriage to me in 2023, while he was still legally married to Elena, was now a federal crime. That night, Montgomery gave me some privacy, but the video call stayed on. Elena was still there. "Morgan," Elena said softly. "Cassandra, are you all right?" My hand automatically moved to my belly. "I am pregnant. I am about 6 weeks along. He did this intentionally to use against me." Elena's expression turned to one of horror. "Oh no, I am so sorry. This is not your fault." "But that baby is still his child, just like David and Sophia are. You will have to live with that connection forever." I nodded as my tears started to flow. "I am not sure I can handle this." "You can," Elena said with conviction. You will do it because you are much stronger than he is, and that baby needs a mother who will keep them safe, just like I did for David and Sophia. We were quiet for a minute, two women in different parts of the world, linked by the deception of one man. He was never a real father, Elena finally said. Not to David and Sophia, and not to your child. He was only a ghost, and now he is headed to prison, which is where ghosts should be. I wiped away my tears. Thank you for agreeing to testify. We will make sure he pays for this together, Elena said, her voice like iron, for Jessica, for all of us. The trial was set for November 18th. The prosecution was now in possession of Jessica Brennan's diary. The email arrived on a Tuesday morning, about 2 weeks after Alexander's arrest. The subject line was straightforward and chilling. It simply said, about Jessica Brennan. I was at my desk inside the Morgan Maritime building. I was trying to lose myself in quarterly reports and shipping invoices. I wanted to do anything to make my mind stop replaying that wire recording, the bottle of vitamins, and the look on Alexander's face as the Federal Bureau of Investigation cuffed him. I opened the email. Miss Morgan, my name is Amy Brennan. I am Jessica's little sister. I saw the news about the arrest of Alexander Petrov. I need to talk to you. My hands were shaking as I dialed the number she left in the message. A woman picked up on the second ring. Her voice was quiet and guarded, like someone who had learned not to trust. Miss Morgan, yes, this is Amy. I am so sorry for what happened to your sister. A long pause followed. Then she replied, Thank you. But being sorry does not bring her back to life. I have to know if you are going to make him answer for what he did to her. I am, I promised her. The trial starts on November 18th. I plan to testify. Two other women he conned will also be there, along with his wife from Prague. His wife. Amy let out a bitter laugh. Of course, there was a wife. Jessica really thought she was the special one. She believed David Sterling was her second chance at a happy life after her husband died. She never guessed she was just one more victim on his terrible list. I closed my eyes tightly. I did not even know about Jessica until a few weeks ago. If I had found out any earlier, you would not have been able to change anything. None of us could have. By the time I sensed something was wrong, she had already passed away. Amy's voice started to tremble. She kept a diary. I found it in her apartment after she was gone. I have not let a single person see it, but if you are really serious about making him pay, I want the prosecutor to read it. I want the jury to know exactly what he did to her. Can you send it to my office? I will send it with overnight shipping. But Miss Morgan, Cassandra, when you look at it, you need to understand one thing. My sister was not a weak woman. She was a widow trying to heal from her grief, and he took advantage of that. He met her at a support group. He said all the right things she needed to hear. By the time she understood his true nature, it was much too late. The package arrived the very next day. Inside was a small leather-bound journal wrapped neatly in tissue paper. I sat alone in my office and opened it. I could not get my hands to stop trembling. The first entry was dated August of 2020. The handwriting was neat and full of optimism. I met someone new today, David. He lost his wife to cancer 2 years ago. We talked for 3 hours after the meeting. He understands the loneliness, the anger, and the empty feeling that grief leaves you with. I have not felt this understood in such a long time. October 2020. We are married. I know it seems really fast. But when you have already lost everything important once, you learn not to take a single day for granted. I have never felt this much joy. December 2020. David thinks my friends do not understand our connection. He is probably correct. They keep asking if I'm certain about this, if I have considered everything. But they did not see me when I was completely broken before him. February 2021. The handwriting was very unsteady now. The words were small and panicked. The money has vanished. Every last cent is gone. I looked at the bank statements this morning and every dollar was transferred out. David's phone goes straight to voicemail. I feel like I cannot breathe. I cannot even think. What am I going to do? Then I read the last entry. It was from March 15th. The ink was blurred in a couple of places as if Jessica had been crying as she wrote. He stole everything from me. My life savings, my home, and my reason to live. I reported it to the police, but they said it was a civil matter. I got a lawyer, but we have no one to sue. David Sterling is not a real person. I am now $50,000 in debt. I am close to losing my car. I cannot get his face out of my mind, the way he looked at me that final morning and said that he loved me. If somebody finds this diary and reads it, please find a way to stop him. Stop him before he ruins another life. I cannot continue like this anymore. I am sorry. I placed the journal on my desk and I sobbed. I cried for Jessica, who had tried to start over and instead found a monster. I cried for Eleanor, who was raising 2 kids on her own, for Lauren and for Elizabeth, who were left with nothing but heartbreak. And I cried for myself, pregnant with a child who was created to be a pawn. I called Amy that night. I read it. Amy's voice was strained, like she was bracing herself for something bad. I am going to read it at the trial. I will read every single word out loud. I give you my word, Amy. Jessica's death will not be meaningless. Thank you. Amy's voice finally cracked with emotion. She was worthy of so much more than him. She was. We all were. The following day, I met with the prosecutor, James Sullivan, at the United States Attorney's Office. He was in his early 50s with some gray hair at his temples. He had the intense, focused look of a person who had spent his career putting men like Alexander away. He read the entire diary without a sound, his jaw tightening with every page he turned. "This is very powerful," he said after he was done. Victim impact statements usually come from the family, but this is Jessica's own voice. This is her own testimony from beyond the grave. If the judge permits it, I will read her final entry during my closing statement. Sullivan insisted that if he could not read the diary, then I must. He reminded me I was a victim with every right to be heard. That jury was going to learn exactly what Alexander Petrov did to Jessica Brennan. The trial was scheduled 2 days later. The United States versus Alexander Petrov would begin on November 18, 2024. The case was filed under number 24C10847. We had 42 federal charges, 4 victims prepared to testify, and a diary from a woman silenced forever. Staring out my office window at Boston Harbor, I pictured Jessica writing her last words alone in her Seattle apartment. I thought about my own secret, a 6-week-old baby growing inside me. One day I would have to explain to this child who their father truly was. My primary mission was to ensure Alexander Petrov could never hurt anyone again. The trial was less than a week away. That Monday, November 18th, I found myself on the courthouse steps. A swarm of news vans clogged the street while reporters yelled questions I could not understand above the city noise. Nathan gave my elbow a gentle squeeze and asked if I was prepared. I managed a nod, though my stomach was in knots. The security line inside crawled past metal detectors. Marshals scanned my purse, confiscated Nathan's small pocket knife, and directed us to the 6th-floor courtroom. The corridor smelled of fresh floor polish and old timber. Every bench was occupied by a sea of unfamiliar faces, other victims, their loved ones, journalists, and the morbidly curious. Promptly at 9, a marshal opened the doors. The courtroom was smaller than I had imagined. Dark wooden benches spanned about 30 feet, facing a jury box with 12 vacant seats. At the front was a raised bench for Judge Patricia Whitmore, flanked by an American flag. Alexander sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, his wrists shackled to the table itself. Next to him was his attorney, Margaret Thornhill. She was a woman of about 60 with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, wearing a navy suit. She had the air of someone who had spent a quarter-century defending wealthy offenders without ever losing her composure. James Sullivan, the prosecutor, was at the opposite table, methodically organizing his papers. At 46, with a receding hairline and glasses, he was known for dismantling financial predators with painstaking precision. Judge Whitmore entered at 9:15. The entire room rose to its feet. The judge, a 58-year-old woman in a gray robe, had been on the federal bench for 22 years. Her initial command was crisp and direct. "Be seated." She formally announced the case of the United States versus Alexander Petrov. Then she addressed the prosecutor. "Mr. Sullivan, you may begin." Sullivan rose, fastened his jacket button, and approached the jury without any notes. He began by stating this case was not about romance. He called it a 15-year hunt, with Alexander Petrov as the hunter. Sullivan explained that his prey was not found in dark alleys. Instead, he stalked wealthy women through databases, alumni networks, and even grief counseling groups. He targeted those who were emotionally fragile and alone after a profound loss. He would completely reinvent himself, changing his name and even his appearance. Marriage was his next move. Once married, he would isolate his new wife from her friends and family. He would then use forged documents to drain her finances and destroy her credit before vanishing without a trace. This was his pattern with 4 women in just 5 years. One was driven to suicide. The other 3 lost everything. Cassandra Morgan, seated right there in the front row, was the woman who finally stopped him. Sullivan assured the jury they would hear the victims' stories. He promised to show them the bank records, the shell corporations, and the substance used to terminate a pregnancy. He told them they would even hear Alexander confess in his own words. After hearing all the proof, Sullivan declared, they would lock him away forever. Then Thornhill rose deliberately and offered the jury a serene smile. She suggested the prosecution wanted them to believe he was a monster. Instead, she said they would meet a simple businessman with some unfortunate marriages in his past. She stated these women chose to be in these relationships. They willingly signed every document, including prenuptial and business agreements. She explained that finances shifted and the relationships dissolved. This was not a criminal act, she insisted. It was simply how life goes. She cautioned the jurors against being swayed by emotional tales, reminding them that every transaction was consensual. She urged them to focus on the evidence, not their emotions. My hands clenched into hard fists. Nathan leaned in to whisper that she was skilled, but Sullivan was superior. The trial's first day centered on Lauren Mitchell, a 44-year-old software engineer from San Francisco with reddish gray hair. She took the witness stand at 2. Her voice, though firm, was laced with resentment. She recalled meeting a man named Daniel Ashford at a support group for grieving spouses. Her own husband had died only 6 months earlier. Daniel claimed his wife had passed from cancer, so he appeared to grasp her sorrow completely. They were married 8 months after that. He convinced her to grant him power of attorney to manage her late husband's affairs. Within 2 weeks of her signature, her accounts were drained. $4.2 million had disappeared. The authorities informed her it was a civil matter. Daniel was long gone by the time she could retain counsel. She was left with nothing: no home, no savings, and no ability to trust again. The next day belonged to Elizabeth Warren. She was a 48-year-old restaurateur from Austin who had encountered a man named Marcus Caldwell at a culinary conference. He presented himself as a venture capitalist and effortlessly won her over. He proposed a business partnership and persuaded her to sign a contract giving him control of her establishment. Soon after, $3.1 million from her company vanished. She testified that $80,000 in legal fees brought her no justice. Day 3 was the hardest. Jessica's younger sister, Amy Brennan, took the stand. She was 37, clutching a leather-bound journal. Her eyes were swollen and she trembled visibly. Sullivan prompted her to read the final entry, dated March 15, 2021. Amy's voice broke as she began. He took it all: my money, my home, my reason for living. If you are reading this, please stop him. I cannot do this anymore. The entire courtroom fell into a heavy silence. Several jurors could not bear to watch. A woman in the front row began to weep. Amy stared directly at Alexander and declared that he murdered her sister. Thornhill was on her feet with an objection, which the judge sustained. The words, however, had already landed. The fourth day was my time to speak. On Thursday morning, I entered the witness box and took the oath. Sullivan guided me back to October of 2023. I described the vitamins, my jaundiced skin, and the frightening rush to the hospital. I explained how I miscarried at 10 weeks. I presented the bottle from evidence. Lab tests confirmed it contained oils known to induce an abortion. I faced the jury directly and said, "He murdered my baby." At that moment, Sullivan played a tape. The sound of Alexander's detached voice echoed in the court. He spoke of terminating it. He described the pregnancy as a strategic move and the next child as insurance. I watched as 3 jurors turned pale, looking ill. Alexander remained impassive, his expression unreadable. Sullivan rested his case at 3 o'clock. He informed the jury that tomorrow they would hear from a covert FBI agent. He teased a summer camp photograph from 2009, promising it would explain the entire 15-year story. I stepped out into the fading November light. Nathan wanted to know if I was all right. I had no words for him. I only knew that the full truth would be revealed the next day. On Friday, November 22nd, I returned to a courtroom under a dreary, gray sky. It was more packed than I had ever seen it. Journalists stood shoulder to shoulder along the back. Courtroom sketch artists were busy with their pads, while an entire row was taken by law students. Nathan handed me a coffee that was tasteless on my tongue. The judge's gavel struck precisely at 9. "Mr. Sullivan, you may call your witness." Sullivan rose and announced, "The United States calls Dr. Margaret Ellis." A woman in her mid-40s with auburn hair and steady gray eyes approached the stand. After taking the oath, she sat. When Sullivan asked her profession, she identified herself as a supervisory special agent for the Federal Bureau of Investigation. She informed the court she had spent the previous 18 months undercover using the name Diana Hartwell. A collective murmur swept across the room. My own pulse quickened. Nathan leaned close to whisper that this was my helper. Ellis testified that in March of 2023, she posed as a new widow with a $12 million inheritance. She entered the same grief group Mr. Petrov frequented to prey on his targets. He made contact with her in less than 2 weeks. Over the next year and a half, she meticulously recorded his every move. This included 43 taped conversations. While she never put her signature on any paper, she watched him prepare to strip her of her entire fortune. Sullivan lifted a laptop from the evidence table and asked Agent Ellis about Mr. Petrov's hidden hard drive. She explained she had located a spreadsheet titled Portfolio. The file contained 23 names. Beside each name was an estimated inheritance, family vulnerabilities, and an ideal time to strike. This document was started back in 2009. Sullivan then projected the spreadsheet onto a large screen for the courtroom to see. I felt like I could not breathe. My own initials appeared in the 17th row. It estimated $50 to $70 million. It noted my parents were elderly and my brother was distant. The plan said to act after my inheritance between the ages of 28 and 32. Agent Ellis continued in a steady voice. She stated that Mr. Petrov did not stalk me for 15 years. He targeted me. During the summer of 2009, he worked a summer job at a sailing camp in Maine. He was 26 years old, posing as an investment consultant. It was there he met me, a 17-year-old girl, and my family. He carefully collected information on all of us. He discovered my father was the owner of a large company and my mother had a trust fund. He was even aware that my brother was adopted. He added my name to his list and then simply bided his time. He monitored me from a distance with online alerts and public information. After my parents passed away in 2022 and I received my money, he put his plan into motion. Ellis clarified that this was not stalking but strategic criminal planning. Thornhill objected, stating it was speculation. Judge Whitmore leaned toward her microphone and said, "The objection is overruled. The witness is presenting expert testimony. Please continue, Agent Ellis." Ellis then turned her attention to the jury. We discovered similar plans for Lauren Mitchell, Jessica Brennan, and Elizabeth Warren. Each woman on his list was monitored for years before he even introduced himself. He would patiently wait for their husbands or fathers to pass on. Only then would he make his approach. On Monday, November 25th, the prosecution presented Elena Petro as a witness. Her image appeared on a large screen broadcasting live from Prague. The woman, in her late 30s, looked completely worn out, with dark hair framing her tired face. In the background, two small children could be seen. An interpreter was positioned close to the camera. Sullivan began asking Elena about her marriage. She replied in her native Czech, which the interpreter translated. "We were married in 2012. I worked as a teacher, and he said he was in business. We had two children, David in 2014 and Sophia in 2016. In July of 2018, he left for a business trip to America and did not come back. I made attempts to file for divorce, but he never responded to the legal documents. Under Czech law, I am officially still his wife." Sullivan entered their marriage license and the children's birth certificates into evidence. From her desk, Thornhill, the defense attorney, raised questions about the documents, but a notary in Prague had already confirmed them. The members of the jury looked visibly unsettled. On Tuesday, November 26th, Sullivan presented 3 additional witnesses. Every one of them detailed how Alexander had isolated me from the world. Sarah Collins, my roommate from college and my closest friend for 10 years, testified first. I attempted to call her in the spring of 2024, but the phone would go straight to voicemail. I then sent an email and the response claimed she was traveling with her husband and wanted some privacy. The message did not sound like her at all. I learned later that Alexander had broken into her email account and sent those replies himself. Dr. Raon Torres, who had been my family doctor, was the next person to testify. I contacted her office in August of 2024 to ask about some test results. Her husband answered the phone. He informed me that she had chosen a new doctor. I never had any contact with her after that. Maria Delgado, my neighbor, was the third person to give her account. I had invited her to our neighborhood block party that September. She declined in a text message that was cold and formal, not at all like the Cassandra I was familiar with. It is clear to me now that it was not her. The phone records revealed the full story. There were 17 blocked calls from Nathan, 12 from Sarah, and 8 from Dr. Torres. Alexander had systematically cut off every one of my support systems. At 2 o'clock, Vincent Hayes made his way slowly to the witness stand. He was dressed in a gray suit that was clearly too large for his frame, and his hands trembled. He made a point to avoid looking at Alexander. Sullivan asked him to state his occupation. Vincent's voice was low and scratchy. I produced 47 fraudulent documents between 2019 and 2024. The forgeries included powers of attorney, business contracts, and prenuptial agreements. I established 12 secret bank accounts across 6 different nations. The countries were the Cayman Islands, the British Virgin Islands, Panama, Switzerland, Singapore, and the United Arab Emirates. Alexander and I split the proceeds. I received 40%, while he took 60%. In total, we embezzled $23.4 million, not the $14 million that was reported. There were an additional 5 women who were too embarrassed to report his actions against them. Sullivan then presented a receipt to him. Did you purchase pennyroyal oil and black cohosh extract in October of 2023? Vincent simply gave a nod. Yes. Alexander instructed me to acquire them for him. He told me they were for a personal health issue. I did not question what it was for. On Wednesday, November 27th, Sullivan presented the body camera footage from Alexander's arrest on October 28th. The jury observed me as I confronted my husband inside our home. They listened to his disturbing confession. I terminated it, an insurance policy, and then they watched as FBI agents placed him in handcuffs. A few of the jurors had to look away from the monitor. One woman covered her mouth with her hand. At 3 o'clock, Judge Whitmore concluded the proceedings for the day. Closing statements were scheduled for the next morning at 9. The jury's deliberations would begin right after. I stood in the corridor feeling utterly exhausted. Nathan asked if I was all right. I said that I was, but my mind was racing. The next day, 12 strangers would determine if justice would be served or if Alexander's charm would succeed one final time. On Wednesday morning, November 27th, I took a seat in the first row of the courtroom. My hands were clenched around my purse straps so hard that my knuckles had turned white. Nathan was sitting silently beside me. The courtroom was once again filled to capacity. There were journalists, victim advocates, law students, and curious members of the public who followed the trial online. Precisely at 9 o'clock, Judge Whitmore entered. We all rose to our feet. She struck her gavel a single time. Closing arguments may begin, Mr. Sullivan. Sullivan started walking toward the jury. He held no notes in his hands. He looked directly at each and every juror. For 15 years, Alexander Petrov carefully planned the ruin of Cassandra Morgan. In 2009, he encountered a 17-year-old girl at a summer camp and added her to a list. Then he watched and he waited, tracking her life from a great distance. When her parents passed away and she came into $50 million, he set his plan in motion. He married her. He systematically cut her off from every friend, every family member, and anyone who might have offered help. He forged her name on legal documents. He drained her bank accounts. And when she found out she was pregnant, he gave her pennyroyal oil and black cohosh. He did this to end the pregnancy because a child would have complicated his plans to get away. Then, 1 year later, he intentionally got her pregnant a second time to serve as an insurance policy. You heard his voice on the recording. I terminated it. The next one is insurance. He murdered his own unborn child simply to keep his control. He abandoned a wife and 2 young children in Prague. He drove Jessica Brennan to take her own life. That is 4 women, and one of them is no longer alive. This is much more than a financial dispute. This is a long-running criminal enterprise. He walked over to the evidence table and picked up Jessica's diary. He turned to the final page and started to read her last written words. He has taken it all. My money, my house, my will to live. If you are reading this, please make him stop before he harms another person. I cannot continue like this. I am just so sorry. His voice cracked as he spoke. 2 of the jurors were openly weeping. Sullivan shut the diary and set it down carefully on the table. Jessica wrote those words just 6 hours before she died. She begged for someone to stop him. You now have the ability to find him guilty. You can put him in prison. You can guarantee he will never have the opportunity to ruin another person's life. He returned to his seat. A profound silence had fallen over the entire courtroom. Thornhill got to her feet, adjusted her skirt, and made her way to the jury. Her voice was composed and steady as if she were having a normal conversation. The prosecution wants you to see him as some kind of criminal mastermind, but what is actually before us is a pattern of failed marriages and business arrangements that soured. These women put their signatures on legal documents. They signed powers of attorney, prenuptial agreements, and various business contracts. They made the choice to engage in these relationships. Money changed hands, marriages ended. Events like these take place every single day throughout America. It does not constitute a crime. The government is attempting to transform a civil dispute into a criminal case because the FBI is looking for a major win. You must not allow your emotions to interfere with the evidence. The burden of proving his guilt lies with them. If you possess any reasonable doubt, and I suggest that you should, then you must find him not guilty. She then walked back to her chair. Judge Whitmore delivered her instructions to the jurors. She clarified the meaning of reasonable doubt, the burden of proof, and the 42 charges awaiting their decision. The jury filed out of the room at 10:30. I waited with Nathan and the other victims in a conference room close by. Lauren was pacing the floor. Elizabeth sat perfectly still, her eyes fixed on the wall. Amy held a photograph of Jessica tightly. Elena joined us on a video call from Prague with her two children asleep in the background. Agent Montgomery offered us coffee, but we left it untouched. At noon, an officer appeared at the door. He told us there was still no verdict. It might be hours or it could take days. At 2:30, he returned. The jury was back. My heart began to race inside my chest. We returned to the courtroom. Alexander sat at the defense table, his face showing no emotion. Judge Whitmore took her seat. Has the jury come to a verdict? The lead juror, a woman in a gray sweater, rose to her feet. Yes, Your Honor, on all 42 counts, yes, Your Honor. And what is your finding? Guilty on every single count. The courtroom erupted. Reporters scrambled for the doors. Lauren began to cry. Elizabeth hid her face in her hands. Amy whispered, Thank you, Jessica. Nathan squeezed my hand firmly. I felt as if I could not breathe. Judge Whitmore banged her gavel. Order! Sentencing is set for Tuesday, December 2nd at 10 o'clock in the morning. Mr. Petrov, you are remanded into custody. Alexander's face was completely blank as officers cuffed him and led him away. He did not look back even once. 4 days later, I returned to the court for his sentencing. Judge Whitmore read from a prepared statement. Mr. Petrov, you were found guilty of administering a toxic substance that caused the death of an unborn child. The recording played in this court confirms you deliberately ended Miss Morgan's first pregnancy for control. It also confirms you deliberately caused her second pregnancy to use against her. Federal law and this court's authority exist to protect children. The evidence proves you are a clear danger to the welfare of any child. Furthermore, you abandoned your two children in Prague for 6 years, providing no financial or emotional support. Your parental rights to Miss Morgan's unborn child are permanently terminated. This also applies to any future rights to David and Sophia Petrov. You are prohibited from all contact, direct or indirect, with any of these children. She then raised her eyes from the paper. I sentence you to 35 years in federal prison without the possibility of parole. You will pay $14 million in restitution to your victims and a $500,000 fine. I am also issuing permanent restraining orders for Cassandra Morgan, Elena Petrov, Lauren Mitchell, Elizabeth Warren, and Amy Brennan. You will never contact them again. She then addressed Vincent Hayes. Mr. Hayes, your cooperation has been noted. 15 years in federal prison and $2 million in restitution. Take them away. Marshals escorted both men from the courtroom. Alexander moved as if he was sleepwalking. Vincent's entire body trembled. When it was finished, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, and I gathered outside in the bitter December air. Elena was on a video call, and Nathan held the phone so we could all see her tearful face. No one needed to speak. Agent Montgomery approached us. You saved lives today. You saved women he hadn't even found yet. Women who will now never need to hear his name. I just nodded. For the first time in 18 difficult months, I felt an immense burden disappear from my shoulders. 1 year later, in November of 2025, I was in my home office. My laptop was open while I reviewed grant proposals for the Morgan Foundation. It is a nonprofit I founded to assist victims of fraud. We guide them through the legal process, fund private investigators, and advocate for stronger protective laws. In our first year, we assisted 247 women and recovered $8.4 million. Nathan was in charge of our technology. Lauren served on the board of directors. Elizabeth used her kitchen for fundraising events. Amy was in charge of victim outreach. My phone buzzed. It was a number I did not recognize. I almost did not pick it up, but then I did. A woman's voice was shaking. Is this Cassandra Morgan? I found your foundation's website. I think I may need your help. His name is Richard Caldwell. We have been married for 6 months and I found a spreadsheet on his computer. I closed my eyes for a moment, then opened them. Tell me everything. It was November of 2025. I was at the large window of the Morgan Foundation's office on the 6th floor in Boston's Seaport District. I held my 6-month-old daughter on my shoulder. My baby Elena, named for the woman Alexander Petrov deserted in Prague, made quiet noises, her small fingers twisting a strand of my hair. Below, the harbor sparkled under the afternoon sun as a Morgan maritime vessel approached the pier. The ship was painted the same deep blue my father chose 40 years ago. That legacy was continuing, and so was I. In the office behind me, there was a feeling of quiet purpose. Lauren Mitchell sat at a desk near the window wearing a headset. walking a caller through how to freeze a joint bank account. Elizabeth Warren reviewed a financial recovery file. Her restaurant management skills were now used to trace funds across 19 states. In the back corner, Nathan was building a new database. It linked known criminals to their aliases, fake businesses, and offshore accounts. Diana Blackwood was in Washington, D.C. She was training Federal Bureau of Investigation agents on the methods of romance scammers. Edward Pembroke served as the foundation's lead attorney for free. In only 10 months, the Morgan Foundation had taken on 247 cases, recovered $8.4 million, and provided legal aid that helped capture 3 more con artists. I had used what was left of my inheritance to create something my parents would have recognized. It was a family business, but one founded on protecting people, not on profit. The special helpline rang. Lauren glanced over at me. Do you want me to take that? I shook my head no, adjusted Eleanor on my hip, and answered the call. Morgan Foundation, Cassandra speaking. A woman's voice sounded fragile and scared. My name is Grace Sullivan. I am calling from Phoenix. I think my fiance has lied about everything. I found 3 different passports in his desk yesterday. They all had different names but his photograph. I do not know what to do. My chest grew tight, but this time it was not from fear. It was a familiar feeling. I had heard this same story 246 other times. I pulled a notepad closer, held the phone with my shoulder, and started to write. Grace, you are not alone. We are here to help you. The first step is to stay calm and stay safe. Have you told him anything yet? No. I put the passports back exactly where they were. He does not know I found them. Good. That was the right thing to do. Do not let him know what you have found. Not yet. Is there a safe place you can go? A friend's house or a family member's? My sister lives 20 minutes away. Please go to her house tonight. Pack a small bag. Make it seem like a normal overnight trip. Take your phone, your driver's license, your credit cards, and any cash you have. Once you are safe, we will connect you with a lawyer and contact the Federal Bureau of Investigation. Can you take photos of the passports without him noticing? Grace stopped breathing for a second. I think I can. He gets home from work at 6 o'clock. Do it as soon as you can. Photograph the front and back of each passport. Send the pictures to an email address I am about to give you. Then you must delete the email from your sent folder and from your trash. Can you do that? Yes. I gave her the secure email address, repeated it, and then told Grace the next steps. Document everything. Do not delete any of his texts or emails. Do not touch any shared bank accounts until an attorney says it is okay. You have already done the hardest part, Grace. You faced the truth. We will handle the rest from here. When the call ended, I put the phone down and took a deep breath. Eleanor started to fuss, so I kissed the top of her head. Nathan appeared at my door holding 2 mugs of coffee. He mouthed the words, "Another one?" I nodded my head. He placed a mug on my desk and leaned against the doorframe. Are you okay? Yes, I am. And it was the absolute truth. That evening, I returned to my townhouse on Beacon Hill. I had decided to stay there, refusing to let the memory of Alexander drive me from the home my parents loved. I had the living room repainted, chose all new furniture, and hung new art. The house was mine again. I carried Elena upstairs, changed her into her pajamas, and rocked her in the nursery chair. I sang her a quiet lullaby my own mother used to sing to me. Elena's eyelids grew heavy. I whispered to her, Your name is Elena. It means bright, shining light. You are named after a woman who survived something terrible and came out stronger. You learn as you get older that women often protect each other. We refuse to let evil people win. Family is more than just blood relatives. It is about the people who show up when your entire world falls apart. I settled the baby in her crib, tucked a blanket around her, and walked back downstairs. 2 photographs sat on the mantel over the fireplace. The first was an old picture of my parents, looking young and happy on a sailboat. The second was taken just 3 weeks ago during a visit from Elena Petrov and her children David and Sophia. The photo captured me, Nathan, Lauren, Elizabeth, Amy, Diana, Edward, Elena, and the 2 children all together on our front steps, our arms around each other, smiling from ear to ear. We had become a chosen family, the type that is built to last. Nathan came up behind me and handed me a glass of water. Are you doing all right? I managed a tired but real smile. Yes, for the first time in a very long time. I really am. Mom and Dad would be so proud. We built something good out of all this pain. Outside, the lights of Boston Harbor began to twinkle as night fell. A Morgan maritime ship sat at anchor, its cargo being unloaded under the bright dock lights. The work always continued. My laptop chimed with a new email. It was from Grace Sullivan. I did what you said. The photos have been sent. I am staying with my sister. An agent from the Federal Bureau of Investigation called me an hour ago. He told me they had been investigating this man for months. You saved my life. Thank you. I closed the laptop, went back upstairs, and paused at the doorway to the nursery. The baby was sleeping soundly, one tiny hand curled near her cheek. From downstairs, I could hear Nathan playing some soft guitar music. The house felt warm and safe. The fight was not over, but on that night, another woman was out of harm's way. Looking back, I can now see that God gave me 3 warnings that I almost ignored. The first was Nathan's text message on that October night. God places people in our lives precisely when we need them. The second was the vitamin bottle I had kept in a memory box. That was God telling me, do not throw away the evidence. The third was learning I was pregnant again. That was God's way of saying, this baby is your reason to continue the fight. I did not see his guidance clearly then, but I certainly do now. Please do not be like me. Do not ignore the warning signs because you feel lonely or because someone tells you all the right things. Never put your signature on documents you have not read completely. Do not let anyone isolate you from the people who love you. Betrayal by family is most painful when it comes from someone you chose to trust. But family revenge is not about anger. It is about reclaiming your life and protecting others from harm. Alexander intended for my family's betrayal to be my ruin. Instead, I turned it into family revenge founded on justice, not violence. That is the critical difference. This is my lesson. True love will never demand that you cut ties with everyone you care about. True love does not forge your signature on legal papers or put poison into your body. And a true family, whether you are born into it or you build it, is there for you when everything goes wrong. The betrayal from my family revealed who I could not trust. The revenge for my family revealed the person I wanted to become. If my story has moved you, please leave a comment below. Let me know, have you ever ignored a warning sign that you now wish you had paid attention to? Please share this video with someone who might need to hear this message. And if you are new to this channel, please subscribe and turn on notifications so you never miss a story that could save a life. Thank you for listening all the way to the end. I have one short message for you. The stories on this channel are dramatized for educational purposes. If this is not the right kind of content for you, we have many other videos you might enjoy. Please take care and stay safe.